Have you ever wanted to grow large palms in your landscape, but you think that you're too far north to do so? Well, in this video, we're going to go over several different palm types that can survive all the way up into Zone 5 and Zone 6. We will go over site selection, the correct way to plant, how to fertilize, how to prune, and so much more. Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Warren, and you're watching The Plant Doctor. Let's get started. Palms can be divided into two groups, the non-trunking and the trunking. The non-trunking will be shrub types, but what if you want a really large palm, one that looks more like a tree than a shrub? The non-trunking ones, we know they can grow in northern climates, but what if we want a tall one? That's where cultivar selection and species selection becomes very important. This is the windmill palm. Windmill palm is a trunking palm. It'll get 10 to 20 feet tall and can survive in certain areas all the way up into Zone 6 and Zone 5. However, we have to select the correct cultivar. Windmill palms are native to the Himalayas, so they come with some built-in cold hardiness already. But when we select the right cultivar, we can stretch it just a little bit further north than just a standard windmill palm. Three cultivars that you need to consider when selecting a windmill palm are Taylor, Bulgaria, and Natal. Taylor is a selection from Raleigh, North Carolina. They had a record cold temperature of -9. It killed a lot of windmill palms, but there was one that survived, and that is the one that is propagated in the eastern part of the United States. The cultivar Bulgaria is reported to have survived -24 degrees Fahrenheit. This cultivar here, this is Natal. Natal is named after a city in the Himalayas, and this one has survived temperatures all the way down to -8 degrees. When selecting an area to grow your palms in, you want an area that gets full sun, and we can define full sun as 8 or more hours of direct sunlight per day. And where I'm going to plant this today, right now it's not sunny, but it will be here very shortly. So the house sits here, this is east. The sun came up maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, and within 30 minutes, this area here will have sun all the way till sunset. So select an area in your yard that gets 8+ hours. The more sunlight you can give palms, the better. That gives them an opportunity to make more sugars. The sugars are going to be what gets them through those cold winters. So the more sugars that they can store in the roots, the better opportunity you're going to have to grow a successful palm. Once you have found that area in the yard that's getting 8+ hours of sunlight, another thing you want to check is the soils. You want a soil that's well drained. So if you're finding heavy clays, in particular anaerobic gray clay, so the soil's not draining much at all, that is not the place for your palm. You want a well-drained soil. Here where I'm at, I don't have to worry about that too much. I have extremely sandy soils, 80–90% sands, maybe 5% silt, and very little clay at all. These soils drain really fast. But if you're in a heavy clay area, one thing you want to look for is an area that might have a little bit better drainage than some of the other areas in your yard. Once you've found that perfect spot in your yard, you'll want to dig your hole twice as wide as the pot that your palm is in. This is a 3-gallon pot. It's roughly 10 inches across. So I've dug a hole that's roughly 18–20 inches across. And in terms of depth, you want the depth of your hole to be slightly less than the depth of the soil in the pot. And one way you can do that is take your shovel handle and measure along the side of the pot, mark that with your shovel handle, and then take your shovel handle, put it in your hole, and see how deep your hole actually is based on the mark on the shovel handle. Now that we have our hole dug, we can plant our palm. So one thing you would want to do here is put the palm on its side and slowly rotate it and push on the pot, and then take it upside down like this and work the pot off. So the one thing you don't want to do here is just go pulling the vegetative part out of the pot because you may separate the vegetation from the roots. You never want to do that. And notice how I've got a hand under the roots at all times. Now this one is not really root bound. If you see roots growing in a circular motion around your plant, you may want to cut those up with a shovel, but this one's not that bad. So we can go ahead and plant. We'll simply place our tree in the hole. We'll double check our height. This looks really good. And then we can begin to take these dirt clods, break them up, and put them around our palms. We want to fertilize our palms 3 times a year with either a complete blend slow release fertilizer or a palm specific fertilizer blend. I'll leave links to both of those down in the description below. But what I like to use is Osmocote slow release fertilizer. Now this is a 90-day prill, and we can start to put this out in the spring. 90 days later, we can put it out in the summer. 90 days after that, you can put it out in the fall. So a good way to think about this is the spring equinox around March 20th or so, we can fertilize. 90 days later, around June 20th, we fertilize again, and then around September 20th, for the fall equinox, we can fertilize one more time. We simply put 1 tablespoon of fertilizer on one side of the plant, 1 tablespoon on the other side, and that's it. It's going to give our plant all of the nutrients it needs to complete its life cycle. Once established, windmill palms are fairly drought tolerant. However, when you first plant them, you'll want to water them roughly every other day for the first 7 to 14 days. So you want to water these fairly regularly until the roots begin to establish into the native soil, and then you can wean off. After they've been in the ground for a month, you can water twice a week after they've been in the ground for about 3 months. Really, if you're getting rain once a week, you don't have to worry about them too much, but you want to water them in initially to give them the best chance for survival. As our palms grow, they're naturally going to put on new fronds, and as they do that, the older fronds will turn brown. Now, once they turn brown, you can do one of 2 things. You can either let them fall off naturally, or if you don't like the aesthetics of the brown fronds, you can cut them off. Now, when they're little, like we're planting today, a simple pair of hand snips will do. But remember, these plants are going to grow 10 to 20 feet tall, and we're probably not going to be able to reach those fronds with hand snips unless we're on a ladder. So what I like to use is a recurved pole saw. So this saw here, so we can extend this blade. And what this saw does for us is gives us the ability to get up in the tree without having to get on a ladder to remove those brown fronds. Now the good thing about this particular set of pole saws is it also has bypass pruners, so we can hook the brown frond in the bypass pruner and cut it off that way as well. We mentioned how windmill palm is hardy all the way into zone 6 if you select the right cultivar. However, I really think that you could get away with it in zone 5 if you do the following things. Put it on a south facing wall, in particular if you have a brick home. Brick is going to absorb sunlight during the day, slowly release that heat out at night. And so within 10 feet of that brick wall, it's going to be a few degrees warmer than it's going to be, say, 50 feet out in the yard. Also, you'll want to cover this plant when it gets below -10 degrees. So in a young juvenile stage like this, you could simply put a blanket over the top of it at night, and then in the mornings remove it once the temperature gets into the single digits. Or when the plant's more mature and it has a big trunk, you can wrap burlap around the trunk, or you could wrap a bed sheet around the trunk and keep that bed sheet on the trunk throughout the winter. So when it gets really cold, it's just a few degrees warmer. So those 2 things together, being close to a brick wall, wrapping the trunk or covering the plant, I think with a little extra TLC, you could get away with growing this all the way up into zone 5. As your palm matures, one thing you'll want to look for is what sex is your palm. Palms are interesting in the fact that they can have male and female flowers on the same plant. We refer to that as being monoecious, mono meaning one, so one plant has both sexes. Or they can be dioecious, di meaning two, meaning that you can have a male palm or a female palm. Now we will not know for several more years whether is this a male, is it a female, or is it monoecious having both male and female on the same plant. If you see two different flower types on your palm, you know that you have a monoecious palm. If you're seeing just fruit and no male flowers, you know you have a female palm. If you have just flowers and you never see fruit produced on your palms, you know you have a male palm. Guys, as always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor. And until next time, happy gardening.